Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today I want to look at dovetails, from the simple dovetail to the finger joint to the Bermuda and inlaid dovetails and all the fun variations of it. I want to kind of go through a bunch of these and show some of the differences, where they can be used, and what's all the fuss about. Let's dive in. Now, a bit of history. The standard dovetail is kind of ubiquitous. It's the joinery that everyone thinks about when they think about good quality joinery. They think about dovetails. But historical terms, people kept trying to hide the dovetails. It wasn't a really appealing joint, and you really wanted to make your joinery disappear. You wanted the furniture to speak for itself. And so dovetails were something that were kind of pushed to the background. So for that reason, you started getting half-blind dovetails that you could see from one side, but not from the other. And then for the really tricky ones, you got the full-blind dovetails that just looked like a miter joint, and you couldn't actually see any of the dovetails. And that kind of became the standard. Everyone tried to make the dovetails disappear because it wasn't it was that joint that you just didn't want to see. And most of that was because no one really liked dovetails. They weren't something you showed off. It was just something that held the drawer together. You have your basic dovetail with tails and pins. It looks fairly straightforward. This is just a simple through dovetail. It's kind of an upgrade from the standard finger joint, except the finger joint can get pulled apart in any direction. The finger joint only restrains it in one plane. It can't separate this way, but it can still separate by pulling out this way or pulling out this way. The dovetail takes it one step farther in that it can't separate vertically, and it can't separate inline. It can only separate by pulling this piece out. And so if all of your force is inline this way, like a drawer front, this actually works really well and is a functional joint for a lot of things that just get pulled in one direction. This was exceptionally important back when glues weren't really trusted. They failed quite often, and having joinery that could back that up was very important. Nowadays, with many of the glues and their longevity, it's not quite as important, but now dovetails have kind of come into a thing of their own. We try and show them off, and we've come up with all different ways to show them off. Now, dovetails go by many different names, and in this case you have the houndstooth dovetail, which is a dovetail inside of a dovetail. Looks kind of cool from both sides. Very, very simple design, but it just adds a little bit to it. If you're trying to show off dovetails, this looks sharp. Then you can move on to Bermuda dovetails, and they kind of look like a standard dovetail from this side, but you flip around this side and you got all this weird stuff going on there. It's basically a half-blind dovetail where the tail is through in some places and half-blind in others. Then you can do the sunrise dovetail that looks kind of dovetailish from both sides, and this one is interesting because rather than being constrained in two planes, it takes that constraint from being 90 degrees to the board to now being 45 degrees to the board. So now with either of these, if you pull it in either direction, it's locked, but if you put pressure on it 45 degrees, then they'll come apart. You can see how these look from the other side. You can even get fancy with inlaid dovetails. So this is making a dovetail and then cutting a dovetail into the dovetail, so you get this inlaid look. And one of the first ever machine-made dovetails was the cove and pin, or the nap joint. And this was designed to be made by machines before machines could make actual dovetails. And this is a great way to date drawers because this is only common in the late 1800s into the real early 1900s. And then you can get into the impossible dovetail. It's a dovetail on every side. How does this actually come together? Well, this is actually a sliding dovetail, and so this is constrained this direction. So in 45 degrees from corner to corner, this whole block can slide out. Now, with so many different types of dovetails and ways of joining boards, this gets really confusing for the beginner. Is it right to use a sunrise dovetail in one place, and is it right to use a nap joint in another place? And basically, no. All of these joints will do the exact same thing. They hold a board together at 90 degrees, or whatever degree you might want, and they constrain it in more than just one direction. As to the finger joint, which only is constrained in one direction and can move freely, the dovetail, or any of these variants of it, will constrain it so that it can only move in one direction. Now, you'll have some people that will argue that one particular design or shape is better than another, but in the end, it really doesn't matter. It all comes down to aesthetics. What do you like? What do you think looks cool? What would be interesting to your build? What would fit with your design? And that is the only difference between all of these dovetails is I like the look of that. We're going to make that. Another question that comes up all the time with dovetails is what angle should I have it? You can see how this one has a 1 to 8 and a 1 to 5. A lot of people have 1 to 6, or there's a whole variant of different degrees. And which one is best? Which one should you use? And a lot of people will tell you, ooh, the 1 to 8, you have to use that on hardwoods. And ooh, the 1 to 5, you have to use that on softwoods. Throw that advice out the door. It's okay advice, but it's not great. The only thing it has different is the angle. And it's, if you measure out 1 inch, and then you measure out 5 inches, you have this angle here. If you measure out 6 inches, you have this angle here. If you measure out 8 inches, you have this angle here. So it's 1 to 5, or 1 to 6, or 1 to 8. And if you have a nice narrow angle, you have a very thin dovetail that looks good to a lot of people. Some people really want to show off the dovetails and they want to have an aggressive angle like a 1 to 5. And that's the only difference in the average functionality, is how does it look? Is there any difference between 1 and 5 and 1 and 8? Maybe a little bit, but not enough to really show it off. Which one do you like better? Which one looks better to you? That's the one you should go with. Now this really may come across as spewing a lot of information at you because I have so many different angles and so many different names. And I have entire videos dedicated to each one of these. Each of these are a sample piece that I made in a live video. And if you want to see that, all you have to do is search for Wood by Wright and then the name of the joint. So if you want to see this one, just search for Wood by Wright nap joint, spelled with a K. Or if you search for pin and cove, it would probably come up there. This one, search for Wood by Wright sunrise, and they'll come up there. So look for any of these by their name, and you'll actually see an entire video dedicated to each one of these joints where I make this exact joint. As long as you can make a standard dovetail, you're golden. You don't need to know how to make all of these fancy, funky joints. These are just a lot of fun. And once you've done the standard dovetail and you've gotten decent at it, you might want to try an inlaid dovetail. Or you might want to try yourself a sunrise dovetail. There are lots of different ways that you can do this just to experiment, have some fun. You know, a nap joint looks kind of cool. It might work out in your next project. So give it a try, play around with it, have a little bit of fun, experiment. And this is one of the places that I absolutely love because you can learn very, very quickly because you are not pressured to make something perfect. Grab 2 boards, join them together, play with a joint, have some fun. You will learn a lot about the wood, about its functionality, about your tools, about yourself. And then once you've gotten down to it, you may realize that, yeah, I really don't like this joint. It's just not for me. And then you try another one, you're like, ooh, okay, I like this. I might actually put this into something. But you never know until you experiment. So get out there, experiment, have some fun, play with it, do something that's kind of fun. There's no reason you have to be stuck to just doing the standard dovetail. You can have all sorts of fun with anything you want. And this is not even a total list of all of the joints that will hold boards together like this. There are literally hundreds of other joints out there that will do this exact same thing that just look different. So experiment, have a bit of fun, enjoy your time in the shop. And this is a way that you can relax, understand that it's the first time you cut it. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be perfect. But you can have some fun with doing something that is completely different. And when you look at it, it's like, oh, wow, I did that. So get out there, enjoy your time, and let's see what you can make. So I hope you guys like this little chat. I will leave a link to a whole playlist of joinery where you'll probably see a lot of these joints being made. But if you're looking for anyone in particular, search for Wood by Wright and then the name of the joint you're looking for, and you'll probably come up with a whole video. And in many of these, I have an entire live video where I go through it step by step in real time. A lot of woodworkers out there kind of get into a paralyzation of, am I using the right joint for this? Or where is that joint best used? And most of the time, the joinery really doesn't matter. It's all about aesthetics and what you like. As long as the boards go together and they glue up well, then you've got a joint. And if you do have any particular questions about these, throw them in the comments down below. I do read through as many of those as possible. So I hope you like this, and I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. Also the members here on the channel who've clicked that join button and become members here. Thank you. This channel would not exist without you. I know I say it every week, but wow, we would not be here without you. My wife and I talk about it regularly. Our patrons are amazing people, and if you do ever meet anyone who's scrolling over here on the side, say thank you to them because they're the ones literally keeping the lights on. So I think that'll about do it for now, and until next time, have a wonderful day. I have tried and tried and tried, and no matter what I do, I can't get these joints to roll.
There is a reminder for James, the magnificent, wonderful, benevolent overlord of the universe.
There usually is.